Time to bring in our political strategist, Grahame Morris, here with me in Canberra, and Bruce Hawker in the Sky News Centre. Welcome to you both. I want to start with the Prime Minister's lengthy press conference this morning. Grahame, did that have some familiarity? Any bring back memories of John Howard doing similar when he was struggling at times early on?
Yeah, and I've always thought at various times you need to ease the pressure. You need to stand there, take the wax from the journalist, explain things properly, even go back to square one. And I think he could do a few more. He could do a couple of, what used to be called headland speeches. Maybe start the new year, or maybe end the old year, and just a couple of really big set pieces where you rule the line under things and you say, okay, it wasn't the best, but we tried hard and we got this up, but let me tell you where we're starting from now. It's a good idea.
Did he rule the line under many things, though, do you think? I mean, we still don't know what's going to happen with the GP co-payment.
No, but you will. You will. Some of it before Christmas and some of it in the new year, and then a bit more during the budget. But we've got the mid-year sort of economic statement coming up, so one has to be a little bit cautious about putting things in and out because the statement's coming.
And Bruce, what did you make of it, in particular that line about, what we've done with the ABC cut isn't what we said we'd do, similar with the deficit levy on high income earners, but the ultimate commitment that this government makes is to do its best to govern, he said, as effectively as we can, given the circumstances we're in, and people will reward that. Is he right about that?
No. He's got a commitment that he's got to stick to a commitment that he made to keep his promises, and clearly he didn't keep his promise about the ABC or SBS, and he should just come out and say, I made a wrong promise, I broke a promise, but I need now to justify why I've done that. And he hasn't done that because he hasn't manned up.
Isn't that what he was doing?
He came up with that ridiculous sort of higher duty sort of line that doesn't wash with anybody. I mean, everybody expects every government to go in there and do their best. That's an expectation that the public puts on any government or alternative government. So, no, I didn't think much of it at all. I think it's a cheap way of trying to get out of saying you broke a promise.
I was just going to say, Grahame, it seems to me that Prime Ministers should be able to break some promises, small promises, if they have to, for the national good. But this is the guy, of course, who made that so hard to do by making trust the issue at the last election.
Well, that certainly made it a hell of a lot harder because, he stood on the soapbox and that was his platform. But, it's a bit bloody rich of the Labor Party saying tut-tut when they sort of caused the problem. $30 billion is a damn lot of money to say, hey, we told you one figure. Well, we told you a bit of a fib, but it's actually 30 billion more. And poor old Tony Abbott and Hockey and whatnot, they're stuck with this damn legacy and they've got to fix it.
Well, just on that, I don't want to get bogged down into a budget debate here, but the pre-election budget numbers said $30 billion deficit. We knew that going into the election, and then after the election, the current government shifted $10 billion into the Reserve Bank. That made it $40 billion, and then it's deteriorated since then. It deteriorated to around $50 billion. So yes, deterioration, but there are a lot of factors as to why that's the case.
Yeah, there are a lot of factors.
It's getting worse.
David, really trying to tell me that the figures before the election, were the same as after the election. They just weren't. They weren't. And that's why we're going through all this blinking pain that none of us really wanted.
Now, Bruce, sorry, I interrupted you.
Just on that point, I mean, they carry on about having no money, and yet they're prepared to spend $20 billion plus on this ridiculous paid parental leave scheme for wealthy mothers. If they were really serious about cutting, it's coming out of taxes that are going to be paid for by big business who are going to pass it straight on to consumers, just like the case against the carbon tax was made. So don't pretend that that this is anything other than a slug that's going to be felt by mums and dads out there if it goes through. This is the problem for this government. They say one thing and then they do something completely different. That's where they're getting into all sorts of trouble. They should just be saying, if there's a real problem with the budget, as they claim there is, then we'll abandon this silly paid parental leave scheme. No one's going to hold into account for breaking that promise. That's one that no one will worry about, Grahame. Everyone will say, yeah, we'll give you that one.
I'm not sure. But on defence pay, let me ask you about that. For a month, the government's been defending it. Today, they're not going to proceed with the removal of those various entitlements, including Christmas leave and I think a road entitlement, a driving entitlement, a food entitlement, a few others as well. Bruce, is that a reasonable sort of outcome, do you think? Keep the payoff of where it is, but don't remove those entitlements.
I think it's about as mean and miserable as you can get, I've got to say, David, and I'm not just engaging a hyperbole there. It really is a lousy thing to do. These people put their lives on the line for us when they're in these theatres of war, and what happens? They're told that they're going to get a pay cut. That is unbelievable. Now, this is a Prime Minister who spends a lot of time waving the flag, and yet when push comes to shove, he treats them with contempt. I think it is disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. And I think most Australians do too.
Look, it's a tough one, isn't it? Out of all the pay negotiations, Grahame, that you'll have as a government, it's a sensitive area and one that has a lot of political dangers.
It is tough, and that's why he's eased the pressure a bit in the current climate. You know, it was just too hard. But I think a lot of people have got to be a little bit careful here, including Senator Lambie. You know, I've just noticed going around lately that when you put a bit of sunshine onto what the defence members of our services get, and so they should, but if everyone's talking about it should be tied to the CPI, well, our defence forces get cheap rent, they get low-cost housing, they get free medical stuff for life, they get tax-free stuff.
They also do
if you
some
take
dangerous
those
stuff.
out of the CPI,
Yeah.
as some people are saying should happen from here on in, then our poor old defence forces may be getting substantially less than they're expecting, and I think that would be a dreadfully bad mood. So Senator Lambie and others, when they tie things to the CPI, want to be very careful, because they might take housing and health out, and that's 2 of the 11 categories for the CPI.
I want to move on to the Victorian election result. And Bruce, you were with us on Saturday night as the results were coming in. I'll get your thoughts in a moment, but Grahame, to you first. What do you think are the lessons from this result for other state governments, for the federal government as well?
Well, I tell you what, I'm absolutely sick of weak-kneed characters from one form of government blaming another form of government for their own poor performance. You know, in Victoria, we had the perception of the government for 3 years did nothing. It picked a fight with nurses, ambulance people and all sorts of others. It got distracted by one maverick member for 6 months in Frankston and haired off and tried to run a parliament. It was a complete mess. They set up the issues for the election that were the wrong issues, and then they said to the campaign team, hey, we've mucked it up for 3 or 4 years, can you turn it around in 3 weeks? Well, no, you can't. And every blinking poll except 2 for 3 or 4 years, they were behind. And people are sort of surprised that they get done on election day. Yeah. I was a bit hot under the collar last time.
I can tell that. I assume you're referring to people like Jeff Kennett and others who've blamed the federal government.
Yeah, not just Jeff. No, it was more of the sitting members who should have taken the blame from themselves. They were in the chair.
Do you disagree with much of that, Bruce?
Look, a bit, although I do agree that you shouldn't blame the campaign if they've been mucking up the government for about 4 years. We've all been there. But I don't think this was entirely a state-based campaign. Clearly it wasn't. The news poll, Sky poll that came out on Saturday night demonstrated that. I think something like 57% of the people thought that there were significant federal issues involved in the campaign. And when you go around cutting jobs, destroying the car industry, then clearly people are going to say in places like Victoria, well, what the hell's going on here? You know, you are ruining our economy. We've got a 6.8% unemployment rate. Those things are referable to federal issues. And I think
what about the PM's argument today that he actually did what he could to help by backing in the East-West link so strongly, and also the Royal Commission into the building industry as well?
Well, he shouldn't have put up the price of petrol in the middle of the campaign. I think if I was Dennis Napthine, I would have been a little bit upset about that, and clearly he was, but of course he couldn't do anything about it. And you know, Victorians are continuing to feel the pressure of this government and its refusal to listen. So yes, there were state issues. Of course, the fact that they lost control of the parliament, only ever had a majority of one, and then Dennis Napthine never was able to operate with a working majority, were very serious breaks on the government. But it was done no favours at all by Tony Abbott, Joe Hockey or any of those characters with the way in which they just kept putting the screws into Victoria. And people in Victoria responded accordingly.
Yeah, I guess one of the worries might be for the federal government, Grahame, that the Victorian budget was actually in pretty good shape. I think it was the best in the out of the states. They had surpluses forecast across the 4 years, and yet voters have still turfed them out after one term. We saw a chaotic parliament. People don't like that. They like to see a government in control.
Yeah, we haven't done it, but we should actually congratulate Daniel Andrews, who actually, for some time has been quite steady. And he ran a good campaign. And I admire anyone who wins an election because not many people do. What was the question?
I was just saying, even though the budget's in good shape, voters have kicked them out after one term. Is that a worry for the federal government that despite all their effort to fix
Well, it's a worry, but we all talk about the one poll that counts, and that's polling day. If you transpose the Victorian election vote to the federal election, the Labor Party does not pick up one seat in Victoria, not one.
That's an interesting point.
Now, admittedly, the federal polling in Victoria is worse than the state polling, but that's a real poll. They wouldn't pick up one seat. But this idea that somehow or other the Vics had a terrific budget and then the feds knocked it off, if a state government cannot get a run in its own media on its own issues and beat Canberra, there's something wrong with them.
Final point, I'll congratulate you, Bruce Hawker, on being the first to call it on Saturday evening. I think we were about 7:30, about an hour and a half into the coverage when you called it, and you also tipped the number of seats. You look like being bang on with the 48 that you forecast at the very start of the evening. So well done to you. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Catch up with both of you next week. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you. We'll take a break.